Introduce to you our new head coach, Dave Canales. You can stand up. And our new president of football operations, general manager Dan Morgan.
What is going on, Panthers Nation? Carolina Dad here, your host of the Two Growls, One Roar podcast. And oh my freaking goodness, this episode, folks, is like, it's just not meant to be, but I'm going to try. This is the last attempt. I've now tried to record this thing like 6 times, and I'm not even lying. And I've gotten through half of it. Probably twice, 3 times, taking a step back. I recorded it, mixed it, put it out on YouTube, didn't mix right, took it down. I have tried. Anyways, let's get in, because you don't want to hear about my misery of trying to put together the podcast. You just want to hear about my thoughts. And let's do it, folks. The Dan Morgan, Dave Canales press conference, and in a previous take, I got so confused with days and time, was yesterday, although to me it feels like years ago, when I went on ESPN Wilmington to talk about my thoughts on the presser, my thoughts on Dan Morgan and Dave Canales, and I'm happy to share what I think coming out of this after watching it now basically twice with all the clippings and things that I've seen through it. We had David Tepper kicking everything off, introducing Dave, Dan, and even Brent Tillis, who was in attendance, for the start of a new era here in Carolina. So Dan Morgan was really the first one to talk, gave his background, thanking people, even thanked Scott Fitterer, thanked some former players. It was pretty surprising for me for him to name drop Scott Fitterer, considering Fitterer just got laid off. But he did it. Kudos to him. They have ties together. They've been together, for quite a while, so I get it. It's kind of a weird situation to be in when you take over his job and, he's fired and you're in his seat now and you're thanking him. It's kind of a weird thing. But anyways, Dan's highlights included dogs, talking all about dogs as far as the type of player that he wants to get here in Carolina. Dogs. As soon as I heard that and saw it happen, I went immediately to that meme of the football kid in high school that's, rattling off names of players. John Doe, dog. Billy Bob, running back, dog. John Schmo, he plays baseball, but he's still a dog. And I posted that immediately. And hey, fun fact, as I was looking up that video trying to find it to repost it, I found a video of that same kid today who is, I guess, an Army Ranger and going through Army Ranger school. And he recreated that video, which was just a cool thing to see. So kudos to him, man, and kudos to him for serving our country. But he talks about getting back to that kind of talent here. And he's played with some really good players, and he referenced a lot of the Panthers greats, Jonathan Stewart, Luke Kuechly, Thomas Davis. I'm not even going to, Jake Delhomme, I'm not going to mention everyone. He didn't mention everyone, but he did talk about those players. And he's a guy that made it to a Super Bowl, played at a high level, most of his career, and he knows what it takes to get to that point. And so I think he, hopefully as a player evaluator, is going to be able to find those players to get them here in Carolina. That's my hope. That is my ever-living hope, that he can get it and get it right. And I hope for his sake that he does. The other thing that he said that really kind of got me going was talking about fearing the Panthers logo. And I can tell you what, not many people fear that logo now. I bet if you looked at the schedule, they probably saw Panthers on the roster, on the schedule coming up, and they're like, "Oh, this is going to be an easy win." Hey, I had those moments in my life as a player in sports. You see the so-and-so team, and you're like, "Oh, this is going to be an easy win. Like, do we really have to play this game?" And I think that's what people think about the Panthers. But he said he wants to instill fear in people when they see the Panthers logo. When they get out of the bus at Bank of America Stadium, they want to be feared. Have people fear coming to play the Carolina Panthers. It's not like that, man. let's get that going. And it's going to take some time. There's no doubt about it. But if we can take, progressive steps moving forward to get better every day and to get into that state of mind, I'll take it. Because right now at the bottom of bottoms, you can only go forward. And he talked about playoff football and wanting to instill that, culture is going to be a big thing here. Instilling a culture that was brought along during his time with, fans waving all the towels, going crazy. And I'm like, are we reinventing Sandstorm here in Carolina for the Panthers? I was like, you can just load up a bus of South Carolina fans and give them free tickets. We can get this place packed, rocking. Bring them on. Like, we can, there's no doubt in my mind that they could do that. No doubt in my mind. But I like the sentiment, and now it's going to be his time to deliver, because I talked about, this is now almost a year into this podcast. Last year I started it right after Frank was hired. I was very optimistic, as you know, if you followed back then. And things are different this year. I'm happy. I am ready to get hurt again, but I also am going to be, level-headed, understanding that we've got a long ways to go to get back to being competitive. And you got to do that in steps. And it starts with free agency, and it starts with the draft. You got to be able to hit in those areas, which is what Dan Morgan is going to have to do for this team. Now, on the flip side, this tandem between Dave and Dan, we got to hear Dave Canales. And Dave Canales kicked it off. He shows some emotion, which is something I like. And I'm not talking about all sobby cry emotion. Although, when he started talking about his wife and the impact that his wife had, he was, I'd say, borderline close to maybe shedding a tear, is what it looked like from my perspective. But he's got some emotion, man. And I like that in a coach. I talked about that on the radio, that as I've played sports, and I'm not saying I have to have someone out there to cuss me out by any means. I understand, like, there's different levels. I have coaches that did that, and I rode with it. But I do want a coach that shows passion, that lets me know that he's committed and he's into this. And that's not to say that Frank wasn't, or that Matt Rule or even Ron at the end of his time wasn't like that. But as a younger coach that comes in here, that's what I want to see. And I think that's something that Dave's going to talk about, because he did also talk about an emphasis on culture, and building culture here, and the carryover that he's had with Pete Carroll. The impact that Pete Carroll's had on him is a good thing. And I think we're going to see some of those same characteristics carrying over here. And one of the things about Dave, too, is he's someone who's put it all out there. So I don't think he'd ever expect to get to this point as far as, maybe, being a head coach with his trajectory. But this guy started as a JV coach. And he talked about that. He talked about being so excited to go out and coach a JV football game that they lost. He was just so happy to be doing that. Like, that was his passion. And his wife was like, yeah, I think you can do this, but also think you can take this to another level. And you can take it as far as you want. And you go from JV coach to community college up to USC, University of Southern California, then to Seattle, and then, all the years in Seattle to Tampa Bay, and now a head coach in the NFL. And he was asked about that, and, not really knowing how to respond, because, that is such a journey. And through that journey, he's also battled some things. He's got the book with his life, This Marriage. Now, I've not read it. I'm gonna need to read it now. I was a Panthers fan, but faith is an important thing for him. But he talked about battling addiction, and if you haven't, go out and watch the Beyond the Game interview with Tony Dungy. I was able to catch that. He does, talk about some of this in that. But to expose yourself like that, and I know that all that stuff happened before he really got to this point. He probably never imagined that he would be in this point. But all that stuff's resurfaced, and it's like out in the air, and he's taking it head on. Taking it right in the face, and dealing with it, rolling with the punches. And he's ready to build a culture. And I was listening to WFNZ, maybe it was yesterday, day before, talking about, and I can't remember the player, so please forgive me, but there was a former player who's a coach for Seattle now that was a Panthers player, but worked with Pete Carroll, worked with Canales, and talked about Pete Carroll's attitude and what he brought, and how, it may look a little bit corny from the outside, but a lot of the players bought in. They enjoyed it. They loved playing for him. And it's something that, resonates with a lot of players on the team. And I think that we're going to get that same kind of thing out of Dave. And I'm just anxious to see where it goes. Like I said, I'm not getting my expectations way up. Y'all know my fan theory of how this thing goes with every team in the NFL offseason. So Super Bowl happens. So everyone's pretty much level minus those who win the Super Bowl. Everybody's going to be kind of level set. Although I think there's kind of tiers. Like if your team made the playoffs, you're a little bit higher. If they didn't, you're maybe a little bit lower. But then you start talking about free agency. And then free agency happens and you start to creep up. And you get into the draft. And that's like your pinnacle. The draft is the pinnacle point. You maybe even could stretch it into OTAs and minicamp. Possibly you could take that thing maybe to training camp. But you get to that peak, you hit into preseason and the season, and that's where most people fall. And that's how it happens. That's my fan theory of optimism as a fan for anything. The problem with the Panthers this year is, like, if you think about this plane, at 2 wins, we are like down here. So our, trajectory, if we're going to get back, we're not going to be up here, we'll probably get up to here, right? And that's okay. And I'm not telling fans don't, get excited because, Dave was asked about winning football now and playoffs, and like he wants to win. It's going to be a tough task. Like he's not going to be able to just come out and win day one, knocking off 12, 13 wins. We may shock the world. We never know. Never know. It's why you play the game. But I think we're in a good position right now. When you look at the NFC South, so one, Tampa Bay now has to get a new offensive coordinator. You've got Atlanta, brand new staff. They've got a new offense and defense. You look at the Saints. Let's say Seahawks. You look at the Saints, brand new, although the Seahawks do have a new situation. But you look at the Saints, they got a new offensive coordinator. So all new offenses. Teams struggling or hoping to find an identity. Baker Mayfield looking for $40 million. Who knows? And that's where we are today. And that's all you can ask for. That's all you can ask for at this point. And I think moving forward, start to see some progress here. And he was asked about his work with short quarterbacks. So having worked with, Russell Wilson, I was about to say Geno Smith's big, Russell Wilson and Baker Mayfield. And he said, hey, I'm not going to give you the proprietary information on how I was able to be successful with those guys, which I like. And I like that a lot. But he has been very high on Bryce Young. He doesn't feel like this past season was a failure. He felt that this past season was part of him being able to build. And we even have the Panthers dropping an article today with a feature with Peyton Manning quotes, who said that, Bryce has got a very bright future, folks. Very bright future, and it's something to build off of from this past year. And that's all that we can ask for. So here we are, folks. Offense is going to have a brand new offensive staff. It has been confirmed that Tilly's gone, so all new hires on the offensive side of the ball. Hey, and the big news, Ejiro Evero coming back is what it sounds like. So that was brought up as well. And Canales has talked about how much he values Ejiro Evero and respects him. He had to go against him twice, and really solid defense. But this puts us in a really good position because Canales can focus on the offense and the install and calling plays and running that side of the business. And Ejiro Evero can take that side of the defense as an organization or business and run that and do his thing. And I think Canales can trust him and know that things are in good hands, which is all that you can ask for. All that you can ask for. So I think there's a lot coming from that. I'm going to have a ton of more content coming out in the coming weeks, folks. But until then, that's all I got. Y'all have a good one.